Okay, one of the most fundamental lessons that I want you to really walk away from this program, understanding, adopting, is the concept of greed. And just remember this saying: pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So, whether we're talking about Bitcoin, real estate, stock options, gold, investing in business, you have to have a philosophy on how greedy you should be. Because a little bit of greed is okay, a little bit. But that's what it means. A pig gets fat, meaning it gets satisfied. But a hog that takes too much gets sent to the slaughterhouse. So I want to talk about this teeter-totter, this is being conservative with your investing, and this is being aggressive / greedy, right? You have to know where to put this. And really where this comes down practically is a principle we'll talk about, which is, locking in gains. So I just use an example of a marketplace where there's been a lot of greed, the stock market. Maybe more relevant now, we'll talk about cryptocurrencies because they've gone up so much. So Bitcoin, as we've talked about before, if you had put in $100 in 2010, you would have 75 million or something like that today. Now, what people then do is they think that's always going to happen, and they keep investing in Bitcoin, and eventually, of course, it's not going to go up. Nothing can go up forever. What goes up must come down. So let's say you had invested in anything: Bitcoin, real estate, stock market, and let's say you had invested, we'll just do it, $1,000 to keep round numbers. And let's say this stock or this particular coin, Bitcoin, or a piece of real estate that you bought for $1,000 went up to $2,000. Okay? And some of your friends tell you, and some of the news articles you read tell you it's going to keep going up, and some say it's going to go down. Right? Who do you listen to? What do you do? Well, I want you to remember today's lesson: lock in your gains, or more specifically, lock in your initial investment. So what you could do with Bitcoin, let's say, if you had put $1,000 into it, or a stock, $1,000, and it's now worth $2,000, you could just sell $1,000 worth. So in this case, you would sell 50% of it, and now you take the $1,000 cash, put it in your savings account, or you could do something else with it later. But the point being is that now, and let's do this example. Let's say you had bought 100 shares for $10, right? So that's $1,000, and now it goes up to 200. Your 100 shares, it goes up to $20. And some of your friends say hold it, and some of your friends say sell it. Some say there's a recession, and some saying it's going to keep going up. So that's worth $2,000. What I'm suggesting you do, now that's worth $20, sell 50 shares times $20. Now you have got your initial investment back. You could be a little more precise. If it had been a few years, you might want a little interest on your money, so maybe you'd sell 60 shares. But we'll keep it simple for this analogy. 50 shares times $20, that's $1,000. Now, guess what? You still have 50 shares left. If it goes up to $40, you get to ride the wave up. If it goes down to zero and the company goes bankrupt, you can at least say you didn't lose any money. That's my philosophy. There's many philosophies on this. Some people would say forget that. Some people would say lock it in every time it goes up 10%. There's whole schools of thought that argue with each other. You can see it in investment forums and in investment meetings. I'm giving you my personal opinion, which I think is very logical. Okay? Remember, don't be too greedy. Somebody who's too greedy, and I'll give you a real life example of this. Mark Cuban, some of you know, he was over here at the house, and we had a long talk for 6 hours. I didn't record all of it. We put about an hour of it on YouTube and stuff. But one of the things that Mark told me was when he sold his company, all right, he sold this radio, online sports radio to Yahoo, and Yahoo paid him in shares. And at the time, I think Yahoo shares were worth like $200 or something or more. And so he became a billionaire worth $1 billion basically overnight. Okay? Now, some of his friends told him, oh, this Yahoo, and he, instead of giving him cash, Yahoo paid him mostly in shares of their company, which were going up at the time. Now, as we know today, Yahoo shares are worth very little compared. I think they're worth $20 or something. A tenth of this, roughly. Maybe even less. So if he had been greedy and just said, oh, it's going to keep going up to 300 to 400, he right now would have, less than $1 million, or maybe not 1 million, but 90% would be lost easily, if not more. In fact, one of his founders, business partners, who was also given Yahoo shares, didn't do any locking in of gains and went from being worth $100 million to like 1 million. So what did Mark Cuban do? He did something a little more advanced, but basically he hedged again. And we'll be talking about this in some of the other lessons on stock options, but you can, there's puts and calls and there's straddles and there's all these things you can do in the investment market. He went out and found a professional. You don't always have to do it yourself. He found a money manager and said, help me protect myself and lock in my gain. And let's say I'm just going to make up theoretical numbers. Let's say he was worth $1.2 billion. He might have taken literally $100 million worth of options that basically he lost, but they were insurance. So now he's worth only $1.1 billion. So you might say, wow, that's a lot of insurance cost. Yeah, but it's better than going down to being worth $100 million. So notice Mark Cuban wasn't too greedy. And these aren't the exact numbers. I don't think they're public. I never asked him the exact numbers. But he had to spend money to use stock options to protect him in case Yahoo went down. And lo and behold, he was correct. It went down. What goes up must go down. And so by locking in his gains, he did very well. He still went down a little bit because the cost of locking in the gains, there was some cost associated. So that's where you can do it with stock options. In the first analogy, you just sell off some of what you have. If you're dealing with publicly traded stocks, you can do something else, which there'll be more advanced lessons on this. Let me just write this out for you. So what are the strategies, 3 ways to lock in gains and not be greedy? Number 1, you can do what I talked about earlier, which is just sell enough to get your initial investment back, okay? Plus maybe a little bit, 10% interest, investment back. All right, so that's one strategy, works well. Strategy number 2 is what Mark Cuban did. You can't do this with all things, but he bought stock options. You'll hear people use the lingo, he hedged. Okay, that's a generic principle. He hedged, but you could basically, it's not really insurance, but it does the same thing. Like insurance on your home, if it catches on fire, you pay money, you pay $1,000 per year, so you lose the money, but if it ever catches on fire, you're protected, right? So you can do this only for certain things. You can't really do this with real estate as easily. If you own a private business, you can't do it. But number 3, the other one to do is, especially with real estate, okay, what you can do is this is very specific to real estate, you can do a loan back to yourself. So people were doing this a lot. They still do, taking a home equity line. So let's say you have a house. You can do this with a business theoretically too that you own, but let's say you have a house that's you bought for $200,000 and it's gone up from $200K and it went up to $1 million. You could go to a bank and get a $200,000 cash credit line, pull the cash out. So you get a credit line from the bank, and you don't need a credit line for the whole million. They won't give you that much. Okay, banks are conservative, but they'll probably, if it goes up to $1 million, it's appraised for $1 million, you can probably take 200 grand out. So you take the 200 grand out and you put it in cash in your bank account. And that way, if the real estate price drops, you've got the cash. The only issue with this is you're going to pay interest on it. The good news about interest is it's usually tax deductible in most cases, for especially if you have a real estate business. Businesses get more tax breaks than individuals. So those are just three. You can do this with a business too. I have a buddy who has a company that's worth probably $100 million or more, and he owns, let's say, 20% of it. So he's worried, oh, what if the company goes down? So he can go, there's private brokers in places like Silicon Valley that will let you cash in. Sometimes they'll literally just let you cash in a portion of it, or they'll loan you money based on the value. And notice here, the cool thing is, if you get a credit line for 200 grand, so you locked in your initial investment amount in cash, if this goes up to 2 million, you still own 100% of the real estate. And that's one of the big advantages of real estate. So there's other ways to do this. This is just the three most common ones. What I'm doing here in these foundational lessons and these principles, you got to understand that it's possible to be too greedy, and it's very common to be too greedy. And probably the number one reason people do bad in investments is they go from being a pig to a hog. You know, a pig. I used to live on a farm here. I'm not going to really try to draw a pig. Oof, this is going to be a bad pig here. There's your pig. Looks like a duck. Sorry about that. You can see, drawing was not in the cards for me. And a hog, we've had hogs before. They're like 400 pounds. They got little legs, you know, and they got big heads, big noses. It looks like two ducks, but you need to be this one. It's still plump, but it's not super fat. Like if I had a choice right now in terms of risk, and I could build a business that has an 80% chance, let's say, of making me $100 million, okay, I'd rather have that any day than a business that has a 20% chance of, let's say, making me $1 billion. And here's why. Risk. I'll read you something that I just tweeted today from Steve Jobs. And this is where greed becomes very dangerous. Steve Jobs, of course, died before his business, he could even utilize all the money he made. And what he said was, my favorite things in life don't cost any money. The most precious resource we all have is time. Time. So what happens is, if you bet your whole life on making the maximum amount of money, on being a hog, well, it's more likely that it doesn't work out. Almost always investments that are going to give you maximum return are riskier. Very, very, very rarely will you find an investment that's going to give you extremely high returns with extremely low risks. Basically, the riskier you become, the upside is you get a bigger chance. But the downside, you get a chance at a larger amount of money, but the downside is very low odds. It's kind of like the lottery. The lottery is pretty, theoretically, you can spend a couple bucks. And I think there's a lottery in Spain right now that the person, you know, it's $1 billion or something to the winner, or 600 million, some crazy thing in the U.S. too. So yeah, I mean, it's great, but the odds are so small. The risk is you're going to spend your whole life just trying to get lottery tickets, and you're going to die. And what did Steve Jobs said? Time is more precious. So it's better to just go through life making solid investments that give you a solid return on your money, and lock them in and move on. And let me just say, one of the key principles you're going to have to understand here, this is from Charlie Munger, one of the great investors alive right now. He's like 93 or whatever. And he says, when he's talking about investing, he says, there's no great tragedy in others making more money than you faster. Okay? It's no great tragedy. I promise you this. No matter what you do in investing, someone's going to do better and someone's going to do worse. Where people go wrong is they go, wait, if I, like Mark Cuban luckily thought wisely, like Charlie Munger, he said, you know what, I already made $1 billion. Who cares? I just don't want to lose it. Who cares if it's going to cost me an insurance premium to buy stock options or protect myself? See what I'm saying? So each of you, you have to decide, are you going to be the person who goes, okay, I have Bitcoin or I have real estate or I have this business and it's going to go up and if I sell it, then other people, I'll look back and see them and go, oh, I only made 100,000 and they made 10 million. There's no great tragedy in it. Say that and memorize this saying. I say this to myself very often. It keeps you out of trouble. There's no great tragedy and other people making more money faster than you. Life is not, because I promise you, no matter how much crazy risk you take, you can try to become the Wolf of Wall Street, and potentially go to jail, and people are like, but why? Why would you want to be the Wolf of Wall Street? Some people say, well, look how much money you made. Yeah, but it came with a risk. Just make solid money. Be a pig. Be a pig, not a hog. Hogs get too big, and somebody sticks a knife in them. And you see this pattern throughout history. Back in the 1700s, there was a tulip. It was kind of like a stock market crash. There was one over flowers, and people got so greedy, they were just like trying to make the last penny, and they couldn't handle, I can't sell because then that person might make more money. That's what happened in 2008 with the real estate market. People just got greedy. They couldn't just buy a house that they could afford. They're like, no, my friend bought a house and it doubled in value, and so like if I don't get in, and then they just made crazy decisions. And then another saying that Warren Buffett says is when the tide comes in, you see who's swimming naked. And when you're taking too much risk and times get tough, recessions come, you get sick, something happens to the economy, one of your investors screws you over, you're late on a bill, guess what? It all comes crashing down. So I hope you'll remember this throughout this whole program. Just be satisfied with solid gains. Do not ever allow yourself to go, well, somebody's going to make more than me. Who cares? They already have, and they already will. And it's kind of like I like to play basketball. No matter how good you are, someone will be better than you. Even if you're LeBron James, people go, oh, Michael Jordan was better than you. And it's just a repetitive. And even if you're Michael Jordan, now people say LeBron's better than you. There is no best. There's no greatest. Bill Gates was the richest man in the world, and Jeff Bezos passed him. Somebody's always waiting in the wing to pass you up. So just be happy in optimizing your life for not wasting time, not taking excessive risk. Okay? So, to close up this lesson, homework below, answer this simple question. Just write back this simple equation. What are the 3 ways that you can lock in your gains? Okay? Protect your initial principal investment. 3 ways, okay? So answer that below, and then that'll unlock the next lesson.